Sarah is part of USDA family like I am, and she's here to show us about the rangeland analysis platform. And I know for those of you, and this confused me when I first started in the U.S. Forest Service, when we talk about range, we're talking about cattle and sheep and things like that. And so I know all of our range people we're very familiar with rangeland analysis platform, and they love it. So it was kind of funny. I went and talked to all of them and said, "Do you want to come and see this presentation?" They're like, "No, we got it. We already use it." I was like, "Oh, all right. Well, I'll just be over here then." So, Sarah, thank you so much for coming today. We're really looking forward to your presentation. So.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Mark, for the invitation. And then, so as Mark mentioned, I'm Sarah McCord. I'm a research ecologist with the USDA Agricultural Research Service at the Jornada Experimental Range. So just a little bit to the east of you guys in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I'm the lead scientist now for the Rangeland Analysis Platform. And I guess by way of show of hands, how many folks have heard of or worked with the Rangeland Analysis Platform or RAP? Okay, so we've got a few folks. So please feel free to jump in if I say something wrong or with your experiences at the end. But we just recently took over stewardship of RAP. RAP was originally developed at University of Montana in partnership with NRCS and BLM and Working Lands for Wildlife. And in the past month or so, we've officially taken over it and we'll be stewarding it into the future. So for those of you who have worked with RAP in the past, it's kind of under new management. We don't expect much of anything to change. We're just going to be making sure that it's up and running and then looking to make it better in the future. So the Rangeland Analysis Platform, let's see if I can get my screen to advance. There we go. Provides spatially and temporally explicit monitoring information regarding rangeland vegetation across the U.S. And we're defining rangeland fairly broadly. As Mark mentioned, you can define it any number of ways. But range, pasture, land is also included in this. And it's really kind of, the cutoff generally is like less than 25% tree cover is sort of our general rangeland definition. And, areas that have potential for use by grazers. So whether that's livestock or elk or, other wildlife species that depend on grazing systems. So the data are available across the continental U.S. Going back to 1986. And so we have two different types of fractional cover products. The first are vegetation cover, perennial grasses and forbs, annual grasses and forbs, shrubs, trees, bare ground. And that's produced yearly. So the 2022 data were just released, and that's providing percent cover of the different vegetation components. We also have a production element, both perennial herbaceous, annual herbaceous, and then what's not on the screen is total production. And that's produced both yearly and at 16-day intervals. So you can track the growing season as it occurs, and I'll talk more about that. And that's produced in pounds per acre. So the vegetation cover data set is an empirical model that's trained on rangeland field monitoring data. So for those of you who may have heard of the BLM AIM program or the NRCS's on-site grazing land NRI program, those are the data that go into this model, as well as some National Park Service data sets. These are all data that have been aggregated and collated in the Landscape Data Commons, which is a data aggregator repository that I run here at the Jornada. So their data are already harmonized and ready to go and plugged into this model. It's an artificial neural network model that we run through Google Earth Engine and then produces these output layers. The production model is an herbaceous biomass model that's mechanistic. So we start with the vegetation cover classes, And then we bring in things like the absorbed solar radiation, moisture deficit, temperature, and a light use efficiency model, all to produce the final production layer. The RAP data can be used in any number of ways, and what we like to emphasize is that it's one tool in the toolbox of rangeland management. So, you'll have your field data and field experiences and observations are always going to be important. Management history, ecological sites, and soil potential research are all important tools that RAP is facilitating. And since this is a geospatial group and remote sensing group, I probably don't need to convince you why remote sensing data are of interest and important. We can use RAP and are using RAP in a number of decision-making contexts to understand variability. So like how much annual herbaceous cover is there between two pastures, and how do those two pastures different, and what might be driving those differences, whether that's soil potential, geomorphic climate issues, or is that management, and what can that tell us about management and maybe the need to adjust or not, or plan for future management. We also can use RAP to provide historical context. So the data are available on a web platform, and you can go and upload a shape file and look at not only current year trend data, but the trends going all the way back to the 1980s, and how that's changed relative to precipitation. And we're having fairly good success with this across the West and using this as a management tool. I think importantly, RAP is also a powerful provider of regional context. This was a paper that was looking at trends in the production data over about 20 years. And you'll see that it's picking up that tree cover is increasing and bare ground is also increasing, which in Arizona, which I think maybe won't be a surprise to many of you who are local there. In other parts of the country, bare ground is decreasing, particularly in Montana, Wyoming, and that could be due to an increase of invasive annual grasses and things like that. We're also can look at regional context in the woody species encroachment and kind of dig down into, okay, so tree production and tree cover is increasing, but is that, when did that increase occur? And we're seeing really that woody expansion is accelerating in most of Arizona, but slowing in southern parts of the state. And that is kind of a trend that holds across the Southwest. And so that's helpful information in terms of, are we still on a trajectory where we have maybe an opportunity to adjust management or not? This is not a product that's available for Arizona, but since they were talking about fire at the beginning of this call, RAP is also being used to inform fire probability maps and get an understanding of post-fire recovery. So in the Great Basin, this is the 22 production, but we actually have just released the 2023 prediction of where do we have the greatest fire probability, and that can be used to prioritize resources in advance. And then, leveraging the production data, we can also monitor forage, where if we kind of know, okay, this is what a favorable year looks like and an unfavorable, conditions look like, and then normal, if we look at it over time, we can see that, we have some variability, but the overall for this particular area of interest, we're starting to see more unfavorable years and appear to be kind of losing forage, and we might want to adjust management. As I mentioned, we also have a 16-day production product, so that gives you near real-time herbaceous production. And so if we know what the 35-year average has been throughout the year, we can then start to watch and say, and we know what, say, a good year looks like, and we know what a bad year looks like. We can start to track throughout the year. Are we on track for a good year, a bad year, an average year? and make real-time management decisions. And so, if we went from January to February, to about where we are, okay, we're a little bit below, we're below average, and we're even below what we're considering to be kind of, a bad year. But as it increases, maybe we had some late precip, and we're back into kind of a normal year, and kind of tracking throughout the year for probably not the worst year we've ever had, but a lower than normal production year, and we can make within season adjustments. So that's all I had. I really invite you guys to work with RAP and give us feedback. We have an online web app, as I mentioned, at rangelands.app. You can also access it through your tile service in GIS, and I'll put all of these links in the chat, as well as through Google Earth Engine, and through an FTP if you just want to directly download the layers. So I know that this is the 4D geospatial group, and I just presented on a 3D product. But we, I think the adding structure, and I'm really glad to hear that there is a 4D working group and you guys are thinking through these issues, because that's the next horizon for tools like this, is to be able to add 4D information and get at structure for, wind erosion, wildlife habitat, fuels, loading, all of the above. So thanks so much for the invitation. And if you have any questions, yeah.
I was going to ask, do you have time for a couple of questions?
I do have time for a few questions.
Great, cool. Maybe I'll start then, because I got kind of one I was just thinking about. How are you guys seeing climate change trends in this 35-year data set? I was kind of curious if you're already starting to see trends, and maybe that's why you're seeing trees and bare earth or being lost in various areas. Is that being tied to climate change at all?
Not explicitly, but I think we're working towards being able to do that. I mean, I think we're seeing it in the issues that you're seeing, like woody encroachment. We're seeing the elevational, there's a paper I didn't include, but the elevational ascent of cheatgrass and exotic annual grasses, and how that, we're able to track that increase over time with warming climates. And so I think there's real opportunity to stack all of this together and tie it to climate, but to my knowledge, no one's done that yet.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you. Okay, I'll open up to the floor. Raise your hands, or let me know if you have questions for Sarah. Okay, I'll ask my second question then. I was kind of curious. You talked in the end about layers that were available. Are those part of the Living Atlas through Esri, or how do we go about finding some of these things? Because I think that would be helpful for people to drive into.
Yeah, and unfortunately, my links that I thought I could just very slickly copy in for some reason are not working. But yeah, so you can download all of it. It's not available from the Living Atlas. That's something that we're working on, making them available there. But right now, it's either through the Google environment and through the FTP sites. And I will get a better link to drop in for how you can download and work with these layers.
Cool. Okay, I'll pause again before I get to my next question and see if anybody wants to jump in. Okay, back to me again. So now I'm kind of curious, what scale of project do you look at when you're talking about these? Because, some of our pastures are not terribly big, but there's obviously a rancher behind that who's interested in this kind of detailed work. What is the sort of size that that sort of RAP looks at? I saw a lot of your stuff was like Montana, kind of thing. What's the smallest people can get to and still find this a valuable resource kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is it kind of depends.
Oh, my favorite answer.
Which is super helpful. So we're seeing, I actually just before this call was on a presentation with some BLM folks, and they were talking about how they're using it at the allotment scale. to do evaluations, and it was trending really nicely with their field data, and so they were feeling pretty confident with it at a small scale. But that may not hold, what works in Montana might not hold for Arizona. So I'm hesitant to say like you're good to go at a small scale. So I think it's a tool in a toolbox, and then it should really be validated at a minimum kind of with professional judgment of like, yeah, these trends kind of look correct versus not. I think some of what we're seeing on the Jornada is that the trends themselves are correct, but the magnitudes are not always quite correct. So you might not want to trust the absolute pounds per acre, but like saying that this was a wet year, this was a good year and this was a bad year, RAP is picking that up really well at small scales.
Gotcha. Even at the 16-day like interval cycle, you can still kind of that change. Because that was what surprised me when I was talking to the range folks about this. Because they're constantly moving the cattle around, 16 days matters, right? Like where they're moving cattle, where they need to get them to be to get them to grow to the maximum cattle size, is important kind of thing. So great. So I do know one of the other complaints, and I don't think it was RAP, but one of the other systems was sort of, this is the number from Northern Arizona. And there's a big difference between like, the Williams Rancher District and the North 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳, but in some of these models, it simply becomes the Northern Arizona number. And that's not as helpful kind of thing, right? There's differentiation. That's why I was kind of wondering about the scale, because that's one of the concerns that they get into is like, well, this, we need something. We need to know what I can do about my little spot right now. Kind of thing. So. Okay, last call for people with questions. I'm out of questions, just so you know. So people know.
Just out of curiosity, Sarah, if you guys, it seems similar, adjacent to the National Phenology Network's tracking of just phenological changes. Obviously, a little bit different than Rangelands, but if you know about that product and how you think those compare.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to directly compare them. I have not. I do think that they are, it is kind of a similar idea. I think RAP is looking at broader functional groups just by necessity than the phenology network, which is looking at individual species of concern. So, it would be one way to, drill down and add a little bit more precision to use them both together and say, okay, we're seeing this green up. What's driving that?
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay.
Mark, you're muted.
Muted. I'm sorry. I was trying to not have you listen to me type. Any other questions out there for that first? Okay. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. I know it was last minute, but we really appreciate your presentation, and I thought it was really interesting. So, and I think it'll be something that I think other people, I know myself, I'm going to go bookmark your layer file and get it out to my forest so they know how to bring your data right into ArcGIS Pro. So
great. And there's a bunch of YouTube videos and help documentation up as well to get going. So
great, cool. Maybe we can get those into the notes so people have them, kind of thing. So.
Well, thanks so much for the invitation, and I'll see you guys later.
Sarah.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.